Hello, and welcome to the video walkthrough for the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization's Active Transportation Tool. The Active Transportation Tool, or ATC tool, was developed as part of the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and is intended to help agencies in the Charlotte area evaluate and compare candidate corridors for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. This tool is not intended to guide any regional prioritization or funding discussions, and is only meant to help agencies internally evaluate and compare candidate corridors for improvements. In this walkthrough, I will be demonstrating how to score corridors using both the ATC tool Excel workbook component and the companion ArcGIS Online data reference, which we will discuss later. We will start on the menu page of the ATC tool workbook, which is like a home page for the entire tool. At the top, we have some background information on the tool, its purpose, as well as some high-level steps on how to use the tool. We also have some boxes littered throughout this page that have those high-level steps as well. Step 1 is to set our global parameters. These are the number of corridors we are evaluating, whether or not we are using global parameters, which is highly recommended except for very advanced users, the corridor type, and the corridor land use contexts. For this demonstration, I'll be evaluating 3 corridors, and I will be using global parameters. For these corridors, I'll be evaluating them as both pedestrian and bicycle corridors. So I'll select both here in the global corridor type menu. Then we need to select the land use contexts of these corridors. To do this, we can use the ArcGIS Online data reference for help. To access the data reference, you can go from the ATC Hub homepage to the data reference tab, and then click here to open up the data reference. On this landing page for the data reference, we are able to upload a geography file of our corridors that we are evaluating. This file can be a KMZ or KML, or it can be a ArcGIS shapefile, or it can be an ArcGIS Online feature layer. I will be uploading a KML file, so I will click File here, and then Upload, and I will navigate to my file, which is examplecorridors.kml. And I will open that up, and it is uploaded. We have one selected down here, so we press Done, and then we see that example corridors is uploaded here. And now the geography file of our corridors will be carried throughout all maps in this data reference. To determine the land use context of our corridors, we can click on this View Land Use Context Map button to view a map of the Charlotte area with rural, suburban, and urban areas symbolized in green, yellow, and red, respectively. Zooming in here, we can see our 3 example corridors in purple: Peachtree Road, Statesville Road, and Beatties Ford Road. We can see that 2 of these 3 corridors are in the yellow area, which are the suburban areas, and we see that 1 is in an urban area. So most of our corridors are suburban, 1 is urban, but that urban corridor is on the boundary of urban and suburban. So going back into the Excel workbook, we can set our primary context as suburban and our secondary context as urban. Your secondary context should always be the land use type that your corridors, that fewer of your corridors lie in. If all of your corridors are strictly urban or strictly suburban, you would select your secondary context to be the same as your first. So if all of our corridors were suburban, we would select both of our primary and our secondary contexts to be suburban. But we'll leave it as urban for now. Once we have set these parameters in the top left, we can go down and we can adjust the weights and percentages for our evaluation buckets and criteria. Evaluation buckets align with overarching goals of the ATC tool and of CRTPO. These goals include things like destination accessibility, path availability, and connectivity, and resources and priorities. All of these buckets have received a default weight based on the corridor type and primary context that we set before. However, your local jurisdiction, or maybe for your specific corridors that you are evaluating, you may want to adjust these weights in some way to adjust the relative importance of each goal. For example, if it is more important for you to have path availability and connectivity ranked higher, then you can choose to set this weight to 30 rather than 15. When you are setting these weights, you don't need to worry about the weights summing up to any particular number. By default, they will sum up to 100, but the tool will do math in the background to make sure that your total score is normalized to 100, regardless of what weights you enter here. We can do the same thing for our evaluation criteria. Each criteria is assigned to a bucket, and each criteria can receive a maximum of a certain percentage of points in that bucket. So the activity density criteria can receive at most 40% of the destination accessibility bucket's available points. Like with the buckets, you can change these percentages to reflect your own priorities. So if we think that activity density should be worth 60 percentage points rather than 40, we can enter that here. And once again, we don't need to worry about this summing to 100 percentage points. The tool will do the math in the background to ensure that you're not going over 100 percentage points, and these other criteria are adjusted accordingly. At the start of a corridor evaluation process, you should go through and make sure that you have carefully selected the weights and percentage points assigned to each bucket and evaluation criteria. Once that is done, we can go back up to the top of this page and we can click on the Generate Template button. This will take us to the template that all of our corridor scoring pages will be based on. We can see at the top, there is some identifying information about our corridors. At the top right, we have a reminder of what our corridor types and contexts are. And then in the main part of the page, we have our evaluation criteria labeled here as metric, the weight assigned to them, the weight that their bucket has been assigned, the corresponding data layer in the ArcGIS Online data reference, whether or not that layer is recommended based on the corridor type and land use context, an on or off switch to toggle whether or not we want to use that measure, the response or the score assigned to that metric, and then here at the right, the tool will calculate the amount of points given to each metric. Here on the template page, what we want to focus on is adjusting the weights here and the use measure column here. In this weights column, we can adjust the weights assigned to each metric further, or maybe more exactly, not based on percentage points, by entering numbers directly into these cells. So we already adjusted the activity density criteria to receive 60% of the available points in its bucket. And we see now that it has a weight of 10. However, we might think this still isn't enough, that we still think activity density should have a higher weight. And in that case, we can manually set this cell to be 20, and that will give the activity density metric a weight of 20 compared to all of these other evaluation criteria. If at any point when you have gone through and entered these numbers, you decide that you want to go back to the default calculations based on the menu page, you can click this Reset Weights to Default button. And you can see here that that changes the weight back to 10, which was the original calculation. Next, we will talk about the recommended and use measures column. As we discussed before, the recommended column says whether or not it is recommended that you use the data layer based on the data that is available in each land use context, as well as what makes sense for each corridor based on the mode that you are evaluating for and the land use context that you have selected. If we scroll down here, we see that some of these metrics say user judgment. These are metrics that will not have data layers associated with them in the ArcGIS Online data reference. And so these should only be used if you have a secondary data source that your jurisdiction has produced or that CRTPO has produced that you can evaluate corridors against. For now, I will say that I will not use these user judgment criteria because I do not have this data available to me. If you want to use just the recommended measures that are spit out by default by the tool, you can click this Use Recommended Measures button, and you can see that that has then turned off these criteria, and you can see then that also their weights are set to 0. You can also manually turn criteria on and off, and I will do that now, and I will do this just to make sure that the scoring process doesn't take too long. I have gone through and toggled off the evaluation criteria that I don't want to use. So we can see that there are only 5 criteria turned on now. And to make this look a little bit nicer, we can click the Hide Unused Measures button up here. And that will condense your screen to only show the measures that you have turned on. If you want to turn on, if you want to show those rows again, you can click Unhide All Measures, and they will all come back. But for now, we will hide the unused measures. At this point, we have set up our page how we like it, our template page how we like it. And so now we will go back to the menu, and we will click on the Generate Sheets button. We can now see that we have 3 new tabs at the bottom of our page, 1, 2, and 3 for each corridor that we'll be evaluating. And we have an overall summary tab, which we will get to later. Now that we've generated all of the individual scoring sheets, we can go ahead and work through the process of scoring each corridor using the workbook as well as the ArcGIS Online data reference. The first corridor that we're going to evaluate is Peachtree Road. And so we will enter that identifying information right now. Peachtree Road, we'll give it an ID of ATC1, and we will say that the jurisdiction is CRTPO. Now that we've entered our identifying information, we need to go through and actually assign scores for each evaluation criteria. Scores for each criteria should be between 0 and 5. It is highly recommended that users, in coordination with their planning agency or jurisdiction, customize the scoring ranges for the ATC evaluation measures. These default scoring ranges are a starting point, but inevitably your agency or jurisdiction will likely disagree with what should constitute a high or a low score. For example, if I scroll down here, maybe for our purposes, we think that we should add in another scoring range for the sidewalk criteria, which is that corridors should receive a score of 2 if the existing corridor has sidewalks on one side throughout part of the corridor, but not all. Before you start to use the tool, you and your jurisdiction or agency should sit down and go through each one of these scoring ranges to determine what you would like to use going forward, and use that consistently each time that you use the tool going forward. Now that we've set the scoring ranges for our corridors, we can go through and actually assign these scores. So we will start with the activity density layer. We will go now to the online data reference, and we need to first select the primary land use context for our study corridors in order to view the data. Our corridors have a primary context of suburban, so we will click the suburban button, and this will take us to a new page that shows another map of the area on satellite imagery with our corridors. On the right side here, we have each bucket and their respective evaluation criteria that you can see using these drop-down menus. And on the left side of the page, we can see our legend. Right now, the only legend entry is our example corridors, which are symbolized in purple. To start, we will be looking at the activity density layer. We'll turn that on, and now I can see in the legend at the left that the dark blue areas have a high activity density, the medium blue areas have a medium activity density, and the very light blue areas have a low activity density. We can now zoom in to Peachtree Road, and we can see that most of the corridor is in a low activity density area, with part of it bordering a higher activity density area. Now, going back to our workbook, we can reference the scoring guide and see what that score should be for this corridor now. And we see our corridor is located along a mixture of medium and low activity density areas, so it should get a score of 2. And so we will input that score there, and we see the amount of points that the corridor gets for that score. Moving forward to the sidewalk layer, we will again go back to the data reference, turn off the activity density layer, and turn on the sidewalk layer. Note that the sidewalk layer is not perfect, and it may not reflect all sidewalks that are actually on the ground. So when you are using this tool, be sure to zoom in on your corridors and use the satellite imagery to confirm whether or not sidewalks are actually along your corridor. The same can be said of the bike infrastructure layer. In this case, we see that the sidewalk layer is actually missing some data. We can see that there are small patches of sidewalk littered throughout the corridor. So we see that there is some sidewalk on one side of the street in areas, but not throughout the entire corridor. If we go back to our workbook and our scoring guide, and we look at the sidewalk layer, we see that the conditions we observe align with the scoring range for 2 that we just set. So we will go in and we will assign Peachtree Road a score of 2 for the sidewalk layer. Next, we'll go to traffic speeds, and we will turn on that layer. And now we can see that traffic speeds layer has symbolized roads by high, medium, or low free flow speed. Zooming in here, we see that Peachtree Road has a mixture of low and medium speed throughout. And going back to our scoring guide, if we go to traffic speeds, if it has a mixture of medium and low speeds, it should receive a score of 2. And so this also receives a score of 2. Moving on to the schools layer, we will turn on the school's proximity layer, and we can see that our school or our corridor is not within a quarter mile or a half mile of any school, and it does not directly connect to any school. So then we can reference the scoring guide, and we can see that if it does not connect within a half mile of a K through 12 school, then the corridor should receive a score of 0. Lastly, we will look at parks and recreation centers. Again, going back to our data reference, we will turn on the parks and rec centers layer. And once again, we can see that Peachtree Road also does not directly connect to any parks or recreation centers, nor does it connect within a half mile of those areas. And so in the same way we did the schools, we can check the scoring guide and see that it should receive a score of 0 in that category. So now we have scored all of the metrics for Peachtree Road, and we can see that it has received a total score of 31.5. Its current ranking is 1 out of 3, but this is because we have not scored any of the other corridors yet. So I will go and score the other corridors and come back to show how we can look at the final results. We have now scored all of our corridors, and we can go through and see that they have all received their scores and the rankings have changed a little bit. To see this all in one place, we can go to the overall summary page, and we can see all of our corridors summarized here. So we can see now that Statesville Road has the highest score with a rank of 1. Peachtree Road is now second in our corridor list with a score of 31.5, while Beatty's Ford Road has the lowest score at 25.9. If the scores don't make sense to you, you are always very welcome to go back and change things. Nothing is set in stone until you are happy with your results. Once you are happy with your results, you can go back to the menu page, and the final thing you can do in the tool is generate a summary. So you can click this button here on the menu page, Generate Summary, and you will enter a name for your summary PDF. I will call this Test ATC. Then you select a folder where you'd like to save it in. I'll be saving it in the ATC demo folder. And then after a moment, the tool will print out a summary PDF for you. So on this first page, you can see that this is just the overall summary page that we were just looking at. That prints out your rankings and high-level summaries of each corridor. And then on the following pages, we can see that we have more detailed breakdowns of each corridor. So we have identifying information up at the top, our scoring information here in the middle, and then at the bottom, we have the scoring results. This shows the weight that was assigned to each scoring category or bucket, and the points that the corridor received in each of those categories. So we can see here, based on this, this overview, that Peachtree Road received the majority of its points from the path availability and connectivity bucket. Scrolling down to Statesville Road, we see that actually it received the most points from destination accessibility, but it also received high scores in safety considerations and recreation and health. And finally, we can see that Beatty's Ford Road also received the most points in destination accessibility, but it received fairly low points across all evaluation buckets. And with this, we have successfully used the ATC tool to evaluate 3 example corridors. Now that you have watched this video walkthrough, you are ready to start applying the ATC tool to your everyday work in your agency or jurisdiction. More information about the tool can be found on the ATC Hub website, and for a refresher on the information presented here, you can view the PowerPoint walkthrough also posted on the ATC Hub website.